And finally, we're going to talk about the third of the big three itemized deductions, charitable contributions. All right, so when we're looking at charitable contributions, the donation must be in cash or tangible goods. A lot of people ask me, can I deduct my service? You know, I went and volunteered. No, you cannot deduct your value of your time. It has to be cash or tangible goods, like giving them a couch or clothes or whatever. Those are what we get to count as charitable contributions. There's no deductions for free use of property. So if I let a charity use an extra office in my building, I don't get any type of charitable contribution for it. If you do some driving for your charity, you can get 14 cents per mile. This was the 2018 number, so it changes every year, so it's probably not 14 cents right now, I'm not sure. But you can deduct a certain amount for your mileage. So this is pretty popular with Meals on Wheels people. They deliver meals all over the county, and they track their mileage, and they get 14 cents or whatever the current year rate is for every mile they drive for their charity. This could be for your church. If you drive around for your church doing whatever they're doing, you can deduct that mileage also. The deduction must be made to an eligible charity, and this one gets a lot of people. Most nonprofits are a 501c3. You may have heard this term before, and this actually refers to the tax code. Code section 501, subsection C, paragraph 3, tells and describes what a 501c3 charity is. And if your charity is a 501c3, then donations you give to it are qualified charitable contribution donations. Churches and religious organizations are generally not 501c3s. They're kind of a special group, but they are allowed deductions to that also because they don't have to file to be a 501c3. There's other forms of 501cs. 501c3 is what you're most aware of for organizations, you know, like Goodwill, Salvation Army. Other forms of 501cs are also able to make donations to. These start to come into some other ones like, you know, your VFW or American Legion. That's not a 501c3, but it is a 501c, and donations made to it also qualify as a charitable contribution. You can donate money to the federal, state, or local government. So if you want to give the city of Denison $5,000, that will absolutely be a charitable contribution. It cannot be to the benefit of an individual. And this one gets people a lot of times. You know, maybe somebody's house burned down and you wrote them a $1,000 check to help them out. It's charitable. It was meant with good intentions, but it doesn't count because it's benefiting just an individual. So one way to get around this is to give the money to an organization who would then give the money to them. But again, you cannot give it to your church and say, hey, give this money to Larry whose house burned down. Because now you're designated, and that's making a restricted contribution, and it's restricted for the benefit of a certain individual, and that's not going to make it a charitable contribution. But oftentimes, a church or charity will create a fundraiser or a drive to benefit a certain person, and therefore that qualifies. Yeah, and giving money to the guy on the street will not be deductible. If cash is donated, your deduction is the amount of cash donated. Seems pretty straightforward. If property is donated, then generally the fair market value of the property is your deduction. Some limits, if the sale of the property would have resulted in ordinary income. So, you know, if you donate some inventory to your charity, you might have some limitations on it. And if the value of the property is more than $5,000, you must get a certified appraisal. So this is pretty helpful because you may have bought a piece of land for, you know, $10,000 50 years ago, and now it's worth $1 million. If you sell it for $1 million, you're going to have a pretty significant tax liability on that. You know, $150,000 or so, maybe $200,000. But maybe you don't really need the money because you're independently wealthy, and so you want to give the land to your church or charity. Therefore, you would get to deduct the fair market value, or $1 million, even though you only paid $10,000 for it a long time ago. So this is a pretty helpful one. Your deduction for a charitable organization cannot exceed 60% of your AGI. I think I said that wrong. Your charitable contribution deduction cannot exceed 60% of your AGI. You can give as much money as you want to an organization. There is no limit on how much money you can contribute. There is a limit on how much you can deduct, and it cannot exceed 60% of your AGI if given to a public charity. And there are some other limitations on the 30% if it's given to certain charities like fraternal societies. Again, that's where we're talking about VFWs or the Masons, things of that nature. You're limited to 30%. Substantiation of your donation: keep your receipt and other proof of your donations. If you give $250 or more to one organization, the organization is required to give you with documentation of your donation. So if you have a religious organization you go to and you give them more than $250, it's very common for churches and whatnot to send out letters at the end of the year saying, hey, your contributions for the year equaled this much money. And so that is your substantiation. If not, you have to keep up with any receipts you get or cancel checks, things of that nature showing that you documented it. But this is the one that catches a lot of people off guard, is if it's more than $250 to one organization, the organization has to give you documentation. The letter that you get should include any description of property donated. So if you donated some clothing or whatever, and if you got anything back, we donated $100 and we got free tickets to go see a ball game. And those tickets were worth about $50. So now we don't get to deduct the full amount. We've got to subtract the fair market value of anything we received for our donation to come up with our donation. If you donate more than $500 of tangible goods, this would be clothes, furniture, whatever, anything but money, you're required to fill out another form documenting what it was, how you got it, how much you paid for it, what's the value of it now in order to deduct it. And then, so it's amazing how many people value all the clothing and stuff they give to Goodwill each year at about $495 for some reason. That just seems to be the magic number people like to donate. There are some other rules. If you donate a vehicle, years ago, this was a big one. People would donate crappy vehicles and donate a ton of money for it. And the IRS got wise. And so they said, no, we're not going to let you donate what you think the fair market value is. Now we're only going to let you deduct how much the charity sold the vehicle for. So if you donate a junker to your charity and they sell it for $50, all you're going to get is a $50 deduction. The only time you're allowed to estimate a value is if the charity uses the vehicle. So you have an extra car, you give it to your church, and they say, hey, you know what? We could really use this car to run our youth group around, so we're going to just use it. That's the one time that you get to say, okay, well, that car is worth X dollars, and that's what I'm going to deduct as a charitable contribution. Quid pro quo donations: if over $75, the charity must provide you with documentation. Now, quid pro quo is if you get something, they'll give you something. So only the amount above the value of the goods or services received would count as a charitable contribution. So this is very popular for people to say, if you'll donate $1,000, you'll get to go to our big fancy dinner that we're having, and the value of that is going to be $300. And then you would only get to deduct $700 of it. College sports is a prime example. Donations of X thousands get you season tickets, or get you in the box, or get you reserved seats or whatever. So this is where they're not allowed to deduct the full amount that they donate. They have to deduct the fair market value of whatever they get in exchange for their donation. So charitable contributions are pretty straightforward and easy. You got to make sure it's a valid organization. So if it's a religious organization, those usually aren't 501c3s. And when I say it's a religious organization, I mean truly if it's a church or some sort of mosque or temple or something along those lines, they are usually exempt from having to file 501c3 forms. So your donations to them are still deductible. Now, there are organizations that are like auxiliary to a church or religious organization, and those usually do file for 501c3 status. And so you have, I can't really think of any, like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the FCA. That is a religious organization, but it's not a specific church. And so it is a 501c3 because they've made all those filings. It's hard to become a 501c3. And so that's why a lot of people try to get out of it by saying, well, we're a church. Well, you got to really be a church or a religious, place of worship to qualify for that, free pass on filing the 501c3. If you're not sure, most places will list on their letterhead or something, we are a 501c3 organization, because they know it's very important. If you're not sure, you can look it up. You can go to irs.gov and they maintain a database of every organization that is a 501c3. And so you can look it up. If, you know, drunk Uncle Larry says he's a 501c3 and he wants you to donate to him, but it's going to be a charitable contributions to you, you can go to the IRS website, look up drunk Uncle Larry, and find out he's not a 501c3, and therefore you're not going to be able to deduct your contribution to him. That's charitable contributions. That's the big three, the taxes, the interest, and the charitable contributions. That's what most people get to deduct as itemized deductions. There are other ones, obviously, and we're going to talk about some of those in the next video.